Union conventions are notoriously pro-leadership of the union. It is very, very uncommon for even sizable minorities of union conventions to take strong stances against the leadership.
So the letter carriers convention was important because, we previewed it last week and we explained how in a lot of union conventions, they are really not, they're really not like places of struggle. They're kind of pageants. They're kind of like, let's talk about how great our union is. Let's talk about like all the cool things that our union did in the last year. And all of that stuff is fine and great, but typically, unfortunately, I think there's just very little actual debate and discussion about the direction of unions at our national and international conventions. But the letter carriers was absolutely not that. There were resolutions that will, if followed, extremely change the direction of the union. There were charges brought up against the national president, and that that in and of itself is kind of the president emeritus Rolando said, virgin territory. It's like not common. So with that kind of table setting out of the way, there were the resolutions and the charges were the biggest, were some of the biggest things. And on the, but they did talk some about, just general like letter carrier craft stuff. They talked some about the violence against letter carriers across the country and UPS drivers. They talked about the new Department of Labor heat safety regulations and the letter carriers unions, their commitment to pushing the Postal Service to implement those heat standards. But then the resolutions, the biggest one was the open bargaining resolution. And now the interesting thing about the open bargaining resolution is that the executive board, per at least the people who were pushing the open bargaining resolution, the executive board of the National Association of Letter Carriers was opposed to the open bargaining resolution for a very long time. For 8 months, they had been opposing it. And then immediately before, like in the week or two before the convention, they came out in favor of open bargaining, quote unquote. But they watered it down. And so basically the executive board felt like they knew that they were going to lose a floor vote and they didn't want to do that. And so they put forward their own open bargaining resolution, so that they could kind of chalk it up as a win. And there you go. And so that happened. The open bargaining resolutions that passed at the Letter Carriers Convention do require the union now to give regular and meaningful updates to the members about negotiations. They require the union to hold nationwide public rallies about the state of the negotiations. The convention did vote down side-by-side updates. But this other stuff is really, kind of meaningful stuff about open bargaining, especially when you're talking about having gone from totally closed bargaining and basically no updates. It really is, a different kind of thing. So,
right.
So I know that the Build a Fighting NALC are really happy about that, even if there were things that they would have liked to have seen that was not there. Still, ultimately, this is a really big win, and the Reform Caucus within the NALC is taking it as such. The other big thing at the Letter Carriers Convention was the charges against the president. There were 4 charges against the president, and the National Executive Board for the NALC voted not guilty previous to the convention on 3 of them, but guilty on 1. And so, but there were a bunch of members that were not satisfied with that. They wanted these charges to be heard and voted on at the convention. And so the convention did have a motion to overturn, and then also, members made known that, yeah, we're going to put this motion forward at the convention to reopen these cases. But President Renfro, the president of the National Association of Letter Carriers, he made a ruling that the people bringing these bringing this motion didn't have standing to appeal decisions, and so before the convention could even hear the charges, the convention had to discuss a motion to overturn Renfro's ruling that they don't have standing. Right, so you basically have to vote to be able to vote. And that's what they did. And the convention voted 2,221 to 1,596 to overturn President Renfro's ruling. And so the convention affirmed that, yes, these members have the standing to bring these charges to the convention, and we want to hear these charges. So they did. They heard the charges. Former President Rolando presided over the proceedings. They gave it basically for each charge. The charging party got 20 minutes to make the case. Renfro, because they were all against Renfro got 20 minutes to rebut. And then each got 5 minutes in turn after that to make a rebuttal to anything else that the other had said.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
So after doing that for all four charges, the charges being abandonment of position, impaired driving in an NALC owned vehicle, circulating false or misleading statements about an NALC officer, and the final one was something about, I can't remember. I don't see it here in my notes. But nevertheless, the convention voted the same way as the executive council did. So on all charges except impaired driving in an NALC owned vehicle, the convention voted not guilty. They voted to uphold the executive council's verdict of guilty for impaired driving in an NALC owned vehicle, and to uphold the remedies, the punishment from the executive council, which was that Renfro is not allowed to drive a NALC owned vehicle for a year. So I know that there was a lot of disappointment about that from some quarters, but I think that, really the big, one big thing to take away from this is that union conventions are notoriously pro the leadership of the union, right? It is very, very uncommon for even sizable minorities of union conventions to take strong stances against the leadership or the perceived kind of establishment group. And in each of these charges, the ultimate vote was something like 3,000 to 1,500. And so you basically got 33% of the people in that room, which is going to be the most friendly to Renfro of any group of letter carriers. This is going to be the most friendly group to him. And he still had a full 33% of people voting against him and voting to convict him on these other charges. And so, I think probably this does not bode well for his reelection in 2026. So we'll see. We're obviously going to keep an eye on this story. Tyler Vassar is kind of the head of Build a Fighting NALC, and I'm in talks with him. We're going to try to have him on the show here in the next week or two, probably 2 weeks from now, to talk about the next steps for his reform caucus. He talked at the convention about, forming chapters across the country, coming up with a game plan for the next 2 years. And then Corey Walton is affiliated with the Concerned Letter Carriers, who are running a slate of people to challenge the current leadership in the union. And so obviously still in touch with him. And we're going to be keeping an eye on this over the next couple of years. The election is in 2026, so we'll see what happens. And then finally, the biggest thing is that there was no tentative agreement brought up. The letter carriers they're still over 400 days without a contract. They do not have a tentative agreement. There are no signs that they're going to have a tentative agreement anytime soon. And so folks are still very upset about this. So that's where things stand right now with the letter carriers. Like I said, if you want to call in, if you're a letter carrier in particular, 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. That's 844-899-8857. But yeah, I'll kick it over to you, Adam, for, what are your thoughts on how, I know that you weren't following it as closely as I was, but given all of that, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with your takeaway that union conventions are often pretty conservative. I think by the nature of who is often at these conventions, right? It's typically often leaders who have been going to conventions for a long time, who've been in offices for quite some time. That's my experience, at least. I can't say that's universal, obviously, but, from talking to folks in the movement, that seems to be the case. So I do think it's interesting that, at least a third of convention delegates were still willing to, go forward on these charges. I do understand why folks would be disappointed. Certainly based on what I heard from Corey last week, it was, some wild stuff. And to think that there, so far doesn't seem to be a whole lot of accountability on it is definitely frustrating. I could imagine a lot of rank and filers are upset. So, yeah, I would love to hear feedback from folks. If you are a letter carrier, definitely give us a call, leave us a voicemail throughout the week, send us an email or whatever you feel comfortable doing. But yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback because I think it's really, really important that our unions be run well. These are our institutions. We don't have many institutions as working people in America. These are our best tools to fight for ourselves and provide better lives for ourselves and fight back in the workplace and in our community more broadly. So, we deserve leaders who are competent and effective and accountable to the membership, and we deserve unions that are strong and democratic and transparent. And so, that's just my philosophy on it. I always err on the side of more democracy, not less. It can be, difficult to practice that sometimes. But, I think that's generally the approach we should have. And so, those were some of my takeaways. But, 2 years is going to be an interesting ride to see, how things shake out, with already folks announcing they're going to run for office. So I agree with your assessment that there's definitely some reasons to think it's, probably going to be a short-lived presidency for this guy. And, if half the stuff we've heard about him is true, I certainly understand why.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.